and he literally kicked me out of the chair and called me a dumb ass. That was my first initiation into what locker room etiquette was supposed to be. ECW was the first like TV, even though it was local at the time, or it wasn't what it was when it really expanded on, say, TNN. We were very much on local syndicated channels at like 2 a.m. most times, because we could, if people actually found out about it, too many people, we would have been taken off the air. But I learned everything the hard way, by the way. I wasn't a second, third generation. I didn't have anybody that really clued me in during wrestling training about certain etiquette and this and that. I would just get kind of instantly punished and have to kind of try to figure it out. And then there were times where Dreamer, to his credit, would kind of smart me up a little bit or give me a little clue what was going on. My first faux pas in the locker room, and I still do this today, by the way, if I'm in a locker room, which is really amazing. I haven't been in one in a while, but I was sitting in a chair. I didn't know about even if there's 100 open chairs and you're sitting in the one chair that, you're occupying when everything else is empty. When a veteran or anybody who has more experience than you, or in my case, even a lady, I just crossed the board, you give your seat up. And Dean Malenko had walked by a couple times, maybe to try to clue me in, but I was getting dressed or whatever, and he literally kicked me out of the chair and called me a dumb F or whatever, and he was right at the time. I mean, Dean turned out to be one of the biggest jerks I've ever dealt with in wrestling later on, even after I was clued in, but he was right in that particular type of thing. It wasn't so much there's 100 open chairs there. It was just literally an old school gesture of respect for a veteran. And that's, on top of the handshaking and saying hello to everybody individually, even if you just saw them the day before back then, the giving up the chair or giving up the spot, or, then the locker room is an expansion of that. That's a whole nother world of where do you dress and where do you not dress. I got some good stories about I would dress with the locals by choice, not because I was punished or anything, but that was my first initiation into what locker room etiquette was supposed to be. Well, in WWE, and I guess in AEW, even in WCW and TNA, they would have stuff labeled as men's locker room, women's locker room, production office. And then, of course, Vince's office and travel and production office, things like that. And then, of course, there was, the men's locker room, and then the extras, locals, enhancement talent, security, whatever. They sometimes wouldn't have it, but towards the end, there would be an extra sign up on a locker room, or it would just be curtains in the hallway, kind of near catering or something, depending upon the arena. Then, of course, you have men's locker room, but then you would see Austin, Taker, Rocky, whoever dressing, and then you would kind of know. And then even in TNA, there were 2 trailers, and then there was a room and near the production office, and then you would have the clicks there that would happen. You just have to figure it out, and then usually somebody would clue you in and say, hey, you can come dress with us, or yeah, don't dress there, you're not over enough. Or you'd walk in and you'd look, and then you'd have the old veteran thing where they're all leaned over, but then they kind of look up at you. All they're missing is the cigarette and putting the cigarette out under their feet. And that look would tell you, you're not welcome here. And then people like Hogan and Savage and other people back in the day, or even Warrior, would have their own locker room. I don't know. That wasn't as prevalent like when I was there. People having individual locker rooms.
Any names you remember? Because I don't even think I'm pretty sure The Rock never had his own.
No, I saw Rocky in the locker room a few times. I think the dedicated or the locker room for this top guy or that top guy morphed or evolved in the tour buses. The tour buses were their locker room.
Asking advice from veterans. I don't think I've ever asked you this, actually. Were you the type of person who would actively seek advice from guys in the main event or just, will you watch my match, or what would you do in this situation? Were you one of those people who were not afraid to ask advice in that respect.
I was not afraid, but the mistake I made too, this is something for new wrestlers or something in the company. Everybody's going to have a different perspective or a different twist or a different bit of advice for the same exact match, maybe the same exact spots. So if I go and ask Taker, can you watch my match? And then I go ask Steve Austin, can you watch my match? Then I ask him for feedback, and they both give me suggestions on what to do with that same spot, but two different suggestions. Do you know the trap I get into next week? I'm going to do one, but not the other.
You don't do either of them.
Or I get heat with both of them, or I get heat with one of them. So what I suggest you do is you got to pick somebody, and usually somebody will be like, will offer the advice. And here's the thing. I always ask people to watch my match. Funny part was I would ask Vince to watch my match, and he was in Gorilla. Because I know sometimes he'd be too busy. And sometimes he would call me over. And in this thing here, there's never a perfect match. For the people who listen on audio, it's a thumbs up from Vince. That's like, I don't have really time for that. But if he really liked something, he would get up or call you over and tell you. And if he didn't like something, you would hope he would tell you. Because if he would just bring the glasses down, you'd be like, no, I'm not seeing anybody next week. I know that now. But you have to pick. It's almost like picking a mentor. So you have to really be careful, because what happens is not only the fact that you want to pick a mentor that kind of like mirrors, like for me, it would have been maybe Shawn Michaels, just for the look and some of the moves, but it actually turned into people I traveled with. Glenn, Rosie, even Charles Robinson. Charles, when we're out there, if you see something that's going sideways, man, just give me an Iggy. Give me something. Or, Charles, did you see something with why did that spot get botched? You know, what happened? The referees they don't get enough credit because they're looking right there at what's going on from your perspective. So the referees will be maybe the first people you want to kind of ask, because then the referees also feel like you're empowering them and you respect their opinion. And they're going to do more for you in the ring and out of the ring. It's always good to it's kind of like the production people. You want to make friends with them too, because not only are they hardworking and they're really good guys most times, but because I made friends and asked those guys, hey, this is going to happen, can you catch this? That's the reason why I got like that purple lighting and got the cool, made me look like a star on Heat, because the production guys just did it one day. Because like, dude, we're gonna make him look like a star. You know, that's the good part. But getting back to the mentorship, you want to pick somebody that you can stick with and that will give you real advice, that will say to you, that sucked, that will say to you, hey, guess what? It was good, but I'm going to split hairs because I know you can be better. Don't get lazy. I know you can be better. Don't get content, you know, or pull you aside and go, what the F was that? That's what you need, that brutal honesty with that. But if you have more than one, that person could say it sucked. This person says it's great. The next week, you do what the person said that sucked. The other person goes, well, I watched it. Why didn't you do what I told you to do?
Were there any people in agents, veterans, maybe not main eventers, who would just offer unsolicited advice and for the most part was bad advice?
Well, you have very much different eras. During the time of agents, you have, when I came into the company, Blackjack Lanza, Tony Gurria, Terry Taylor, who else? Well, Pat. You know, I didn't have Arnold Skolin or Strongbow.
Was George Steele still there while you were there?
No, he wasn't. No, 98, 99, I think he was gone. Or at least he wasn't at the shows. He might have still went under like a $500 a week thing that Vince took care of a lot of legends. But what I would say is a lot of the advice, see, this is the problem too. A lot of the advice I got, I wasn't knowledgeable or experienced enough to see it for what it was. I was still in the, you're trying to handcuff me. You're trying to hold me back. I just want to do cool stuff. I still had that little bit of like ego that wanted to do some cool stuff. And I listened to them, but there were a lot of times where I went out there and still did other things to try. Now, I did it on house shows. If Terry Taylor, Blackjack Lanza, or Tony Gurria told me during this TV match, we need you to do this. I'd fall in line. I wouldn't balk. The house shows were the time to experiment and, dare I say, get chewed out and get heat. So the agents, I got a good agent story. Tommy and I, this is the funny thing about you talking about, like, basically the fixes end, even more so than just the match results. We used to, on the house shows, be in the production office, and just by chance, Lanz's the agent report was on the desk. It's a Saturday. This was the agent report for Sunday. And the agent's report every single week would be, there were so many signs for Triple H, and he had the biggest pop of anyone on the show. Who's bringing signs to a house show? And there were no signs. He had the biggest pop and this and that. But guess what? More times than not, these agents left before Triple H's match, which was last, because we had to stay and watch and learn from the main eventers. And then for our match, it was they had a good little match, good for what it was. It was like a Meltzer review of my matches, good for what it was, which I would say, well, that means it was a good match, right? And that's just how it is. I mean, they were figured in. They had the reports. They knew how their bread was buttered, and they needed to kiss up to Triple H, and obviously Vince and everybody in the office did as well.
How long would you leave it until you're in the company? On average, would you be giving advice to someone now, let's say, because I'm sure it was different in 1999 when you were there, but how long should you leave it generally until you think you're senior enough to actually start asking for creative changes?
I think the environment fosters that you always are scared to ask for changes or to do things. Now, I had a very unique spot. Obviously, I put everybody over. I was in a spot where that was my position, but they didn't bother me a whole lot with how to do it. They knew that I would do good business and that I wouldn't go into business for myself. And if they wanted 90-10, 50-50, 70-30, if they wanted that within that, and they also knew if I was a babyface especially, and they needed to cut the time, I would cut out my shine completely because it doesn't mean a damn thing. So, and they knew when they put me in the spots where, dude, there was times on live TV where I would go out there, I would be in Gorilla, they would say, you're cut down to 2 minutes. I would, on the way to the ring, get in there first, they would say, you have 12 minutes now. Then when my opponent's coming down, they would switch it to 6. Then during the match, they switched it to 8. Then during the comeback, they would cut it back down to 1 or 2. Or, you see what I mean? It would be, and I would just go home early because politically, what I would do, especially if it was on Raw, and Heat, it didn't matter. But on Raw, I would make sure, and this kind of, I guess, lended to maybe my longevity there politically, is I would make sure we would go home early and then go up to the people at main event of Raw and SmackDown or whatever it was and say, hey, guys, we went home a couple minutes early or 3 minutes early. You got 3 more minutes on your match. Or I would tell the agent, we did in front of the people, the main event, like, I'd be like, yeah, we went home early. We weren't sure, but we wanted to make sure the main event had enough time. Because who cares about my match? And that's just the truth.
I've got, do you know what? We can't do the unwritten WWE locker room rules. I'm already going to say that. We're going to have to skip that for Take a Shot, a future episode, but at least I've written all the answers down here. This is something I'm interested in. When will you find out what you are doing on a given day? So let's call it a TV taping. So you get there at 12. Is that call time?
Well, 1 p.m. on the East Coast, and then West Coast would be 11 or noon, or, depending upon the time zone. But 1 p.m. would be the latest that we get there. And I would usually be under the mindset of NFL football teams. If you're on time, you're 15 minutes late. I would get there early. Plus the fact, my introvert nature, I would get there at noon, 12:15, get my catering, and even get the next meal, and then go hide.
With that being said, who would you have to check in with to let someone know that you're in there and you're not going to get fined for being late?
Well, usually the agents or Tim White, who used to hand out draws and stuff, they would have a table sort of in the parking garage area or the beginning of the hallway. You can't, that's why if you're late, they'll be there and they'll see you. You can't avoid passing that table. So that's why we get there early. And There used to be, like, I know at the end of WCW, they had like a fingerprint reader or something to make sure you checked in. We didn't have that, but
The biometrics.
the biometrics, yeah, they knew about CCTV in 1984 before England. So I did a little bit of there, a little bit of callback for you there.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, Viva Vendetta, the whole deal. What was it? What was it? Something. Remember the November 5th? I can't even remember that. They would say it during Viva Vendetta. Awesome movie.
You're going to hate me for this, but I tried to watch half of that and I checked out. I got bored. I'm very easy to get bored with films. So I've got no patience.
What about the Stevie Richards show? How bored are you with that? 18 episodes in.
You must be joking, for God's sake. You must be joking. The most entertaining 2.5 damn hours of wrestling talk.
2.5 hours on a short day. How's that?
Tell me about it. I keep writing too much stuff. You know this.
That's
I mean,
good.
You reams of stuff.
My wife asked me yesterday, have you guys run out of topics yet? And I go, oh, just ask James that question. We got about 80.
Seen the list of topics I wrote. I wrote one like one day as well. When were you told what you were going to be doing that day? And since, because like you just said, well, I'd just go and hide somewhere for most of the day. Would someone have to come and find you? Would you have to report to somewhere to know what you were doing that day? When would you find out you were doing maybe a pre-tape promo or something like that? Give us a rough idea of times and who would come and get you and who would produce these backstage things.
Now, when I say hide, I mean more, there were times where I would take my Dreamcast or my Xbox up to a suite and play video games. But if you get there, like I get there at 12:30, I'd eat before anybody gets there. If they had a gym in the arena, usually I would make that my second workout. I would know, I would prepare enough to know, like in Cleveland, they had a gym. So I'd be able to be like, okay, in the morning, I'll do my cardio, then I'll do some weights in the afternoon and some stretching after I eat, something like that, or after 4. 1 o'clock is the call time, say on the East Coast. Production meetings are happening. Usually 4 p.m. is when the board starts to go up. Now that's changed over the years. They rip up the script right up till showtime from what I hear now, especially when Vince was there. But usually I would ask, I'd see Tim White, I'd see an agent. How you doing, Tony? You have any idea what I'm doing today? I would initiate by asking, and sometimes because things would change. My favorite thing with Gurria, I would ask Tony Gurria a serious question but so many people used to kind of mess with Tony. Hey, and sometimes I would be sarcastic or cynical. And I would say, hey, Tony, what am I doing today? And he grabbed my arm. He goes, what are you, a smartass? I'm like, what? Or when we were calling a very basic finish on a house show, like a sunset flip, I would be like, okay, I do this, this, and this. They go, oh, here comes sunset flip. And Tony would grab my arm and go, smartass.
Tony Gurria is one of the agents. We'll talk about agents another time. Take a shot. I know. But Tony Gurria is one of those people, man, I hear the gamut of either my most loved or specifically I remember Shane Douglas saying, man, I hated that guy. I
wouldn't say that Shane would probably be more on than I would. I would let it roll off my back because Tony would just say, hey, I haven't won a match in months. I was like, you haven't booked me to win a match in months. You smartass. Walk away. That's all he called me. But, yeah, Tony, I mean, there's agents that have their favorites and there are agents that are just, they don't have a clue. Some of the best wrestlers make the worst coaches, and some of the worst wrestlers make the best coaches, just like in football or any other sport.
This is something I don't know if it's more prevalent now than it was back then in the mid-2000s, let's say, for example. But, we saw that photo of Drew McIntyre and CM Punk chatting ringside before a show, and there was tons of people around the ringside, people in the ring practicing. I don't know if it's as prevalent back in the mid-2000s, as I say, but what is the etiquette for going to the ring and trying to practice moves? Would you have to wait for other people to clear out? Would you have a set time, let's say?
Well, it all depends. They did have set times for tryouts where they would just basically have locals or extras or anybody come in that they wanted to take a look at. You want to talk about the worst thing ever. It's like going to wrestling. After you start wrestling, the worst feeling in the world is trying to get back in shape for wrestling or wrestling in front of no people, no crowd, no noise, and then having agents and writers around the ring just watching you with no emotion and not trying. When guys would do that, by the way, I would make Dreamer and I would make noise and clap and try to encourage them because we might be working with these guys one day. Like I would remember that. So I don't ever want to make anybody feel like off. It's hard enough, like I said before, without making it harder. But they would have rehearsals, say entrances. Vince would come out and rehearse certain segments. In between, I think, when those guys and girls would get in the ring for the tryouts, and if there was rehearsals after the production meeting, somewhere in between there, I'd work out with Val, I'd work out. Arn would be there helping guys and girls out. Fit would be there working with the girls. Usually between, I guess, 1 to 4. So when I say I was hiding, it was usually until I seen people in the ring. Then I would come down and show my face and work out. And really, I think no matter where you're at, you should work up a little bit of a sweat in the ring, house shows and TV and stuff like that, and keep yourself sharp. Because you're going to have off days, but getting in that ring even for 15 minutes and just kind of rolling around and working up a sweat kind of gets you in the rhythm and the groove for the match that night. It's really, and if you don't have a match that night, definitely get in the ring and work out because you're getting reps in. Like if I got into the ring right now, I would be just as rusty and my timing would be off as somebody who's 6 months into the business. And I got to re-get that along with the conditioning.
How about hanging around in gorilla position? What's the etiquette around that? Do you only hang about there when it's your match coming up? Can you be there watching monitors, for example? Let's say, when are you sort of welcoming? Are there any times are you not welcome in gorilla position?
Well, we have a monitor and chairs out there, usually where the interview, the big monitor with the box truss behind the interview and the interviewee, that would be where you would watch it. Also, there is monitors in the locker room or monitors. Now, if your match was coming up next, you'd be on deck in gorilla. But no, the gorilla's big now. I've seen when they walk through the gorilla position, it's huge. It wasn't that big before. And for people who don't know, the gorilla position is a tribute to Gorilla Monsoon. That's why we call it the gorilla position.
I sort of missed this out. I was going to leave it for next time, but I'm actually going to bring it up now. Is catering, because you said, you sneak into catering early, get your food, leave. But for the most part, is catering just like high school in the sense that, you're not allowed to sit certain places, you can't look at certain people? I don't get it. But what do you think about, or in your experiences, what were the rules of catering, the do's and do not do's?
Well, don't sit down with Vince while he's eating, because sometimes he would come into catering with Triple H or whoever at the time, his inner circle people, and sit down and eat. You'd say hello to him or whatever. Obviously, there's no handshaking if he's got food or whatever, but it's definitely a high school cafeteria with your cliques and who you sit with. See, that's why I went early and did that. I've had experiences. This is the funny part about wrestling too, that you have friends, but in wrestling, there's still politics that trump friendship, even true friendship. For example, Tommy Dreamer would sit with me at time to time, when I was in catering or doing whatever. And then when Edge and Christian would walk by, without even saying anything, he would get up, grab his food, and go sit with them. Gotta learn how to play the game. You say you gotta learn how to play the game, wacko.
I see. So it was for political reasons.
But he was friends with those guys. He traveled with them, but the second they showed up, he had Jericho, he would go sit with them. And I'll be like, wow, thank God at high school I was a nerd that didn't have a lot of friends because this would have shocked me at this point. But that's just the way it is. And that's why, you look at the people the people I stay in touch with now, and this can get to the dressing part, most of the guys I talk to today were locals and extras during my time at WWE that I got to know and become friends with.
What were the rules if you want to invite friends or family to shows?
I never had friends and family come to shows. I always separated that. It was work. I assume now it's a lot different. They even have daycare, I hear, for the babies. There was times where, if I was in Philly, they would ask me if I have any tickets for family or friends. Sometimes I would get them for like my brother or my sister or my cousin, but I would never see them. I'd be just going to the next town because I didn't live in Philly. I either lived in Connecticut or Florida, and that was it. To me, it was like I couldn't wait to get home, wherever that was. And I'm sorry, but I would never do that because the whole thing too is I saw early on that on the indies, when people had their family and friends, they would use the, "Hey, too close to my hometown, brother. I can't do the job." Or "I got my wife out there, or my mom or my dad." And they never wanted to, it was, like I said, it's hard enough to kind of feel it out and battle to get your stuff in or battle to keep yourself over without introducing that stress of family and friends because you're too tempted, like, "Oh, my family's out there and I'm losing in 30 seconds." And you kind of, even back then, you didn't smarten your family completely up to what was going on. So they thought you were just a failure in this dream that you had. So, kayfabe back then, I didn't clue my family into, plus I came home with injuries all the time. So they were like, "Man, this stuff's real."
Did you know how to talk then? Or did you just sort of let them figure it out?
Well, when I started winning matches, they knew it was fake.
I see.
That's when they were clued in that, like, our son's not a tough guy. This has to be fake.
Now I've already asked about when do you show up, but you sort of hinted at it before, but when were you allowed to leave?
This was something where a lot of times, with house shows, especially when they put down that rule of stay till the end and learn off the main eventers, which these guys would do essentially a lot of times the same matches. Who could blame them? There'd be runs where you're getting down a match for TV or the pay-per-views, and they didn't have what they had now where people were always filming with phones and stuff to kind of give it away that they did the same stuff. That's essentially what the house shows were, James. The rehearsal for a WrestleMania match, a pay-per-view, a TV match, whatever it might be. So we had to stay till the end, but a lot of times we would try to get out of there. The agents sometimes didn't even stay till the end of the match. Lance and them used to leave for the next town. So that would be our cue, something. But they always had somebody, we'll get to the union thing, because there was always somebody stooging or somebody that would curry more favor by saying, "Hey, they left early." And they would kind of prop themselves up that way on TV. And this is where, when we get into the action figure episode go ahead and say it, I'll take my drink.
Take a shot of Fanta.
Future episode. Future episode.
Future episode.
My action figure had a bag because Pete and everybody knew that Dreamer and I used to leave pay-per-views early. And Dreamer and I would wait till the pyro was going off to sneak out because it was so loud. We could slam that door open and closed and nobody would pay attention. So I always thought, like, it's a weird thing. You want to stay there and you want to do that. But then again, you know why people stayed till after the show? The country club ass kissing
I
after
was
the
doing the
show.
handshake. The gesture.
Yeah, it was great. What a great show, Vince. Oh man, you outdid. I didn't think last week you could outdo yourself, but you outdid yourself. And that's it. And that would culminate the ultimate country club ass kissing session was the WrestleMania after party, which was ridiculous. But most guys got the opportunities for the whole year during that party.
I am just writing that down for a future episode. You know what I'm saying? After party, because that is definitely something we need to talk about at some point. I'm going to ask, right, so as you know, I sent you two large lists, one of them mostly pertaining only to WWE, the first one mostly locker room general. I'm going to ask you a few more from the second list, which is more locker room general, and then we will move on to wrestlers' courts. Taking phone calls in the locker room, what's the etiquette there?
It really all depends on who you are. I wouldn't answer any phone calls. I wouldn't even really communicate in social media like we talked about in the last episode wasn't really a thing. So a lot of times, I mean, early on, it was video games, and then they banned the video games in the locker room. So that would be a good way to pass the time. But I would never really take phone calls. And even then, we didn't have like iPhones or Blackberries were just really becoming consumer level. So you couldn't even, you needed to use that T9 thing. It would take you forever to send a text to somebody, much less an email. So for me, it was like, it was kind of like, what was that? It was a communication blackout for the time I was on the road, and especially at the building.
You just said that, and that's something, damn it, I forgot to mention. The games being banned. Okay, so obviously you were a gamer. That's how you passed the time. Those interminable hours, especially on TV recording days. Why were the games banned, and what were they expecting you to do for hours on end after the games were banned?
Learn your craft. Like, learn your craft. Where I can understand, like I said, getting in the ring, making sure you're still in good ring shape, that your timing's good. Those things can happen. You don't want to spend 2 hours in the ring and then wrestle at night. You're already beat up. It was very weird because the locker room atmosphere was fun, and guys kind of like joking with each other, playing Madden, trash talk. And it was really like a football locker room in a way, where you're talking trash and nobody really took it too personally. Then somebody just said, maybe one person might have had a bad match or something. They're like, well, he was playing video games earlier, and they banned the video games, learn your craft, stay till the end, all that stuff. And then it slowly came back, I guess. Not when I was there. When I got released in '08, it was still largely frowned upon. We didn't have the music room or the video game room like AEW, but that would have, like, to me, it was like you worked. And back then, it wasn't getting paid to learn in the Performance Center. It wasn't an instant push in NXT. It wasn't you were on TV with less than 1 year in the total into the business. You know what I mean? When you got to WWF and WWE at the time, you were already in the business minimum 5, 8, 10, maybe 15 years. So you kind of, like, if you didn't learn your craft by that point, what are you doing here? That was the confusion for me. And I had a lot to learn. I knew it, but my learning wasn't going to come from anything else but getting matches and reps and segments and promo, like live fire. I was going to learn a little bit by watching, but I could still play video games and then watch the monitor during the show. It was very confusing.
I'm going to ask you one more, and then we'll sort of wrap this segment up. I'm not asking for anything specific. We'll probably get to more of that in a future episode. Take a shot, you know what I mean? But when we return to this, taking ribs.
Is there a brand, by the way, called Future Episode that we can get a sponsorship? That would be awesome.
I'll look into the trademark of that. We'll see if we can get it on T-shirts.
I think T-shirts of that.
When your wife said, "Have you run out of topics yet?" It's like we're tripping over topics to fit in. We can't do it. There's too many topics.
Welcome to the ADD version of Stevie Richards show.
Yeah, 18 episodes so far. They're all ADD.
They're all ADD.
Chris loves editing these episodes.
Bless him. Ribs. I'm not asking for who ribbed you or if you ribbed everyone else, but if someone you weren't particularly friends with, who may have pulled a prank on you, in quotation marks, it might have been a prank, it might have been a bit more vicious than a prank. How do you take it? What are the do's and do not do's?
I'm not quite sure. Now, I want to preface this with, by the way, with all this stuff, that I've never, ever, no matter what locker room it is, and especially in WWE, ever felt comfortable, ever felt like I fit in, ever, and that could be just me, but I think the environment fosters that, don't get too comfortable, but in a lot of ways you don't get comfortable at all. So I think the comfort that you outwardly would feel like, oh, I belong, I've made it, whatever, can be misconstrued as arrogance. And that's where ribs can start, pranks can start. Or sometimes, like, if people rib you or mess with you or joke with you, that's because they're accepting you. If they're quiet and they never talk to you, that silent heat is more dangerous than somebody constantly messing with you. And I don't mean messing with you like, crapping your bag or cutting your suit pants or throwing your stuff in the shower. Those things can be kind of mean. The lock, padlocking your bag on the pipes on the ceiling. I'm talking about if you botch something and they mess with you for like a month, or if you mess up a promo and they mess with you for a month about that, or they put it in the show as a rib, those things are fine because it's a natural part of the testosterone-based, childlike, childlike professional wrestling environment, high school. They're going to mess with you. And also, if you sell it, they're going to mess with you even more. That's the key. Now, if you no sell it to the point, like you said, I'm above this. Now it kind of morphs into real heat that you can't take a joke. Dude, it's such a tap dance. The literally, like there's metaphoric eggshells everywhere for you to walk on. And the thing is too, that like it taught me too to not take myself, I overthink, but not take myself so seriously when I started to truly show vulnerability and put myself in positions on TV. People didn't really mess with me because they're like, he kind of already makes a fool of himself on TV. So what can we really do?
Not particularly specific to WWE, but are there any other mistakes to mention now that newbies in a locker room might do that this is the perfect time to sort of ward themselves off of doing it? Things like, I guess, talking too much, or I don't know. You tell me. What do you think?
Bobby Eaton said it best to me very, very long time ago. Don't talk, can't get heat. If you don't open your mouth, you can't get out. Now, it means if someone asks you a question, don't not answer it. A lot of times I think that locals or extras, it usually happens sitting at the monitor watching a match. Say like two locals are on the show, two separate matches, dark match, heat match, whatever it might be. And they're friends, and they're going to get honest feedback from their friend from the indies. The one has the match, comes back, sits next to him, and you have like a Randy Orton, John Cena, whoever else sitting right there as well. Watching matches, but also Booker T would be another one, but he would do his commentary, and that's how he got his commentary job during dark and heat matches. If they come back, and I would pull locals aside afterwards, or even beforehand, if I really knew them and knew they were good dudes, they would sit down next to each other and go, hey man, what did you think? The guy would give the other guy advice. That would be a no-no. Because now you think you're better off than him. You think you're on our level. You can see how that can get misconstrued purposely so somebody can have somebody to mess with. I would usually pull them aside, and I would get heat for this. Why are you smartening these guys up? Because I know the terrible feeling of not being smartened up. Now, if these dudes still continue to be idiots and not listen to the advice, that's on them. You get that one. But I would pull them aside and say, whatever you guys do, I know you're trying to lift each other up, help each other out. Save it for the car ride. Do not even do it anywhere in this building. Do it on the car ride. Because if you do it, they're going to think, oh, you think you're better than everybody else, huh? Don't do it. Sometimes they would listen. Sometimes they wouldn't. And then they would end up listening because they would get it. And they wouldn't be asked back either. That would be the worst part of it.